And motivational techniques. What does science of motivation, Damon, you can continue. What does science talk about motivation? You get motivated when you announce what you want to achieve publicly. So ask yourself a question, whom will you tell? It's fascinating that when we tell others about our objectives, we have higher tendency to achieve them, especially if you tell people who are important for you. That's an important factor, not only when it comes to your family members or your work, but also when it comes to public image. If you, on Facebook or in any other social media, announce what you want to achieve and consider that very soon, in December, on 31st, millions of people will raise their hands and say, this time, but really this time, for sure this time, I will achieve what I want. Statistically, they will say, I want to stop smoking and I want to lose weight. Statistically, they will say these two things. 6 months later, statistically, only 8% of them will still continue what they decided to do. 92% will have given up by that time. That's why in January, it's very difficult to find space, to find room in fitness clubs. But February is a bit better, March is quite easy, April, absolutely no problem, and in June, there's no one there, right? So, but they can improve the chances of achieving what they want to achieve by public announcements. Whom will you tell? Tell people who are important to you what you want to achieve, because people will then feel more responsible for their objectives. Let's look at another one, which would be financial benefits. How much money will I make if I achieve it? It's interesting that we say that some things can be counted and measured by money, some others cannot. But if we find the value in our objectives, then maybe we will be more motivated. That's at least what the science says. Example, let's talk about losing weight. There's research which supports the notion that people who lose more weight feel more attractive. People who feel more attractive, on average, make 14% more money doing the same thing, performing the same task, as people who don't consider themselves to be attractive. So attractiveness pays off. Another thing, also attractiveness influences self-esteem or self-confidence. People who have self-confidence, they tend to do better at schools. Again, research supports it. They get better grades. And now here comes the question. Do they get better grades because they are more knowledgeable? Or do they get better grades because they are more persuasive when it comes to passing examinations?
Maybe they have more self-esteem because they're getting better grades.
And then comes a self-fulfilling prophecy, right? So apparently there's a feedback loop which feeds itself on its own. Because I get better grades, I get more self-esteem, and because I get more self-esteem, I get better grades. And because I get better grades, I get more money, and because I get more money, then I become more attractive, and oh boy, success feeds success, apparently. Just like problems feed problems. Right? Apparently, it's one mentality of success that leads to certain solutions. Number 3 technique would be admiration. Whom will you impress? And it changes depending on personality. Sometimes we want to impress our significant ones. Sometimes we want to impress ourselves. Sometimes we want to impress millions of people. Like, for instance, Michael Jordan, in one of his sort of documentaries about himself, he would say that because he wasn't taken into high school basketball team, then he would always, later on, in his later life, adult life as a basketball player, want to impress and prove that they committed a mistake by not making him. The mere fact of being rejected motivated him to be one of the best in the league. Talk about reframing and ability to employ a shadow part, and instead of working with rejection, he used the rejection to prove that he was better than he was considered to be. Number 4 would be negative consequences. What negative will happen if you do not do it? It's interesting because it is said that we need to achieve a certain level of discomfort in order to decide to change. Let's talk about pain in our teeth. So, how much pain do you need to feel in order to visit the dentist? Some people say, well, I visit the dentist every 3 months. Good for them. But we know that not all of them, not all of us function this way. So, how much pain do you need to feel to go to the dentist? And what's stronger? The fact that you don't like dentists or the fact that you don't like pain? Because then we will have internal rivalry between two pains. One pain is emotional. I don't like dentists. Another pain is our tooth pain, right? And people will compare. Negative consequences motivate us to improve, to accelerate what we want to achieve by showing to ourselves what bad will happen if we don't decide to do something. And it's interesting because sometimes we think about benefits, but benefit is also no loss, which means that if we don't lose something, we also benefit from it. Example, how many people have high blood pressure, but they don't know it in this country?
20%.
Oh, that's very optimistic. Very, very optimistic. In Europe, it's 60%. So I would love to check that. Unfortunately, I don't know. But even if it's 20%, these people suffer and they don't know about this. And they don't know about this. Once, unfortunately, they will, it will be a bit late. Because if high blood pressure executes itself on a kinesthetic level, then normally it's when we need to take pills for the rest of our lives. Because they don't think what negative can happen if they don't visit doctor on a regular basis, they are not motivated to examine their bodies. And because they don't do it, unfortunately, they suffer from disease. So, using this can help us foresee long-term negative consequences of not doing something. And that's why it's motivation. Number 5, further consequences, what will become possible. Well, let's see what can become possible. If I perform here in front of you, you will get something from it. What you will get, I don't know. It's individual. But you will get something from it. Once you get something from it, you will come back home and start thinking about this. If you think about this, maybe you will pass it on to some other people. If you pass it on to some other people, say you pass it on to your children. If you pass it on to your children, maybe they will get inspired. If they get inspired, maybe they will decide to open their own business. If they open their own business, who knows, maybe it will become another Apple. And here comes the illusion of it. Do we know that this will happen? No. Do we know that it will not happen? No. We cannot prove it will happen, neither can we prove that it won't happen. That's why we use it as a motivational technique, because the mere fact of thinking about it motivates me to be here and to talk about it. Because I cannot really know how important this meeting is on a certain level. And this is fascinating because it gives you certain respect and humility towards reality. In 2008, I was asked by a student of mine, I believe this is when we met in 2008, must have been June or July, must have been July. And a couple of months before, in March 2008, I was asked by a student of mine to demonstrate communication technique in the streets of Mexico City. Because he says, Professor, can we use these techniques in order to meet new people? And to be more specific, he wanted to meet a girl. So he says, can you make a demonstration? I say, of course. I didn't know he was going to ask me to demonstrate it on a girl who was just passing by, but he did ask for that. And I did a demonstration. You wouldn't imagine how effective and productive it was, because that was almost 10 years ago, and today she's my wife. So, if you, and mother of my daughter, so if you understand this, then you go, what will become possible? Well, at that time, if someone had told me she will be mother of your child and she will be the most beloved person in your life, I would have never accepted that. But now, I'm way more skeptical to thinking that I know what will happen with the seminar after the seminar. You never know. Neither do I. But because I imagine myself further consequences which are way bigger than myself, then it motivates me to perform. Does it make sense? It's an illusion, but very, very motivational illusion, right? For sooner or later, mind is illusion. Number 6, vision. How will you change the world? Thinking that even one possible behavior can inspire someone else to do something is very, very motivational. It's interesting because sometimes when we do smaller things, we don't realize that they could inspire someone else. For example, say there's trash in the street, then somebody picks it up. A child sees it, and the child is inspired to do the same thing. Later, this child says, what is it example of, this behavior? This behavior is example of taking care of your country. And they decide to run for the office. Can you prove it will not happen? No, you cannot. But if you imagine yourself that you set an example for humanity, you will definitely behave differently, walk differently, talk differently, and act differently. This is how this technique works. The next one is altruism. Who will benefit? What do you prefer? To get presents or to give presents? You prefer to give. Well, honestly, people always answer that. Here comes the question, if because of marketing purpose, we like to be altruists rather than be perceived as egoists. But there's also some physiology to it. People who give presents, they produce endorphins, which are hormones of happiness. The result of it being we feel better. When we give presents to others, we physiologically produce hormones which are positive for our well-being. So altruism pays off. This technique can motivate a salesman rather than only to achieve their objectives when it comes to realizing the plan, to actually focus on the clients. And oddly enough, if they focus on the client rather than on their specific needs, if they focus on the client is more eager to pay more money because he will be serviced well. Altruism pays off. Of course, with altruism, there is a very interesting story. You have an egoist and an altruist. Both come to a room where there's people seated, but in room, it's very cold. An egoist will take clothes of other people, put it on themselves, and survive, but will die alone. Nobody likes egoists. Using egoism as a tool, we can actually never create relationships. Altruist comes into the room, takes their clothes off, gives it to other people. Everyone claps their hands, but unfortunately he gets a flu and dies. That's the story about altruist. But you wouldn't imagine the third one. Third one is an intelligent person. Comes in, turns on the heater. Everybody survives. So this is a very interesting story to inspire you and to understand that both egoism and altruism fused into one creates perspective that is called we. And we is always stronger than I and you. Only on the basis of this, strong family unit can be created or a strong team unit can be created. Where people think about themselves only, they tend to be more on an egoistic side, or they sacrifice themselves for the well-being of others, not necessarily seeing that because of this, it leads to, for example, learned helplessness. If we only focus on our children, that they will never get a lesson that independence is also important. Number 8, where is authority? Who inspires you? It's been researched and proven that when we focus on certain actions, it's also because people who inspire us have taken them on. So who inspires you? Who is a leader of thought? Who motivates you? Do they already, for example, right? Creator of PayPal and Tesla, or maybe some philosopher, maybe they are alive or not. But if you have authority, not only as a side effect, you will learn and express modesty, but also you can surround yourself by people who are your teachers. And this way we can learn. Number 9 would be help. Who's going to help you? Sometimes we don't ask for help because we think that we should have control over the situation, but it comes to the moment into the situation where we will need others. The fact that we realize that we're not alone in our endeavors is motivational by nature. So who's going to help you achieve what you want? This will definitely motivate you as well. And number 10 is competency. If a child comes to parents and says, I cannot do it, or it is difficult, this is definitely a place to use this technique. What are 3 proofs that you can actually do it? Proving to yourself that you are able to achieve something is motivational in itself, because this creates higher self-esteem and makes you more self-confident.